The stars over Lyran space burned quietly, like silver fireflies scattered in the dark. For centuries, the Lyran people had lived under their glow and peace. They were a gentle species, their culture rich with music and art. Their alliance with the young, energetic species called humanity had given both sides hope for a future free from the galaxy's ancient hatreds. They believed the galactic hegemony, the ancient council that ruled the stars, would protect them, guide them. They believed in the promise of a peaceful galaxy. On that day, their belief, and their world, was turned to ash. What happens when the galaxy's self-proclaimed peacekeepers commit an act of unimaginable genocide to send a message? When the last, broken survivors of a massacred species arrive at Earth begging for help, how will humanity respond? And when humanity's fury is finally unleashed, will it be enough to burn down a 10,000-year-old empire, or will it consume the galaxy in a fire from which no one can escape? The Galactic Council massacred the Valorants. Earth's revenge shook the stars. Before we begin this tale of betrayal and vengeance, take a moment to subscribe. Your support ensures these stories are never forgotten. Like this video, and let the signal of remembrance be heard across the void. Alright, let's begin the story. Then, peace. On Lyra Prime, it was more than just a word. It was the air they breathed, the light that warmed their crystalline cities, the music that echoed through their soaring towers. The Lyrans were artists, poets, and dreamers. Their alliance with humanity, a species so full of fire and ambition, was a curiosity to the rest of the galaxy, but to the Lyrans, it was a joy. Humans brought new ideas, new passions, a delightful chaos that complemented their own serene order. A young Lyran boy named Elian was playing a flute-like instrument in the central plaza, its melody weaving through the evening air. His father, a master sculptor, was putting the finishing touches on a statue depicting a Lyran and a human shaking hands. It was to be a gift for the Terran ambassador. Then the sky turned red. The hegemony fleet arrived without warning. Dozens of heavy warships, their hulls black and sharp as obsidian shards, tore through the upper atmosphere. They carried weapons that glowed with the light of angry, dying suns. At first, the Lyrans thought it was a diplomatic mission, an unscheduled visit from their protectors. They rushed to their balconies, preparing gestures of welcome. They had no idea that death was already falling upon them. The first strike came like thunder tearing the sky in two. A hegemony dreadnought, the Iron Hand, fired its main cannon. A lance of pure, white-hot energy split the horizon. The city of 1,000,000 souls vanished in a single, silent heartbeat. Reduced to ash and molten glass, towers of crystal and light collapsed into fiery ruin. The streets boiled. The very air burned. The Lyran screamed, a sound of pure, uncomprehending agony. Why? Why were their protectors doing this? There had been no warning, no words, no reason, only fire. The small Lyran defense fleet, little more than armed patrol boats and customs vessels, scrambled into the skies. They were merchants and police, not soldiers. They were no match for the hegemony armada. Within minutes, their ships burned, torn apart by rail cannons and plasma storms. Escape shuttles, filled with panicked families, tried to flee the planet. But the hegemony gave no mercy. Fighters, like wasps of black metal, hunted them down, blasting them into silent, glittering dust before they could even break orbit. On the ground, the horror was worse. Hegemony shock troops, the brutal, four-armed Kthar, landed in armored carriers. They spread through the streets, their plasma rifles spitting death. Families ran through smoke and rubble, clutching their children, begging for a mercy that was never offered. The Lyrans, who had once sung in their temples, now cried in the dust as their world was drowned in blood. The massacre spread from city to city. Colonies across the entire Lyran system suffered the same fate. Mines, farms, orbital habitats. Entire generations disappeared in one terrible night. The hegemony wanted no survivors, no witnesses, no record of what they had done. They wanted the Lyrans erased. But fate did not bend so easily. One ship, a battered freighter called the Stardust Drifter, escaped the slaughter. Its pilot, a young Lyran named Talon, was not a soldier. He was a cargo hauler. But he had seen his home, his family, incinerated before his eyes. And something inside him had broken and been reforged into hard, cold steel. His ship carried the last of his people, a handful of terrified children, a few elders, broken soldiers who had seen their homes destroyed. Behind them, the Lyran system glowed like a funeral pyre. The hegemony pursued them. Fighters streaked through the void, raining fire on his wounded ship. But Talon refused to surrender. He weaved through asteroid belts, pushed his failing engines past their breaking point, and dove the ship into a hidden, unstable slipstream lane that only smugglers used. The Stardust Drifter shook and groaned, its hull screaming in protest. But it made the jump. When the stars cleared, a single blue planet lay before them. Earth. The refugee ship limped into orbit, its hull blackened and broken, venting atmosphere. Emergency signals, a desperate, sobbing plea in the Lyran tongue, blared across every frequency. Inside, the survivors whispered the truth. They carried the ship's log, the sensor recordings, horrifying, high-resolution images of the massacre, of burning cities, of dying families, of hegemony warships cutting down the innocent. When the Earth Patrol ships boarded the freighter, they were met with a scene of unimaginable grief. Children with hollow, vacant eyes, soldiers lying on stretchers, their crystalline bodies shattered. And the pilot, Talon, his own body bleeding from a dozen wounds, looked at the human captain and spoke, his voice a ragged whisper. They killed us. He held up a data crystal, his hand trembling. They killed all of us. The hegemony, they betrayed us. The recordings were sent to Earth's highest levels of command. Generals, admirals, and the president herself sat in dark, silent rooms, watching the truth unfold on their screens. They saw fire raining on the beautiful Lyran cities. They heard the hegemony's cannons thunder. They watched as helpless, unarmed civilians were cut down without mercy by Cathar shock troops. And in those rooms, a terrible silence fell. Humanity had seen war. They had fought for survival many times in their own bloody history. But this was different. This was not war. This was not politics. This was not a grab for power. This was a message. A brutal, genocidal message, written in the blood of their allies. The Lyrans had been their friends. They had shared food, stories, technology. They had trusted the hegemony. And now, they were nothing but ashes and memories. The leaders of Earth stared at each other. No one spoke at first. No one needed to. They all understood what the hegemony had done. And they all understood what must come next. In the streets of Earth's great cities, the news began to spread. The uncensored footage from the Stardust Drifter appeared on public screens. Families stopped and stared in horror. Anger, a cold, deep fury, began to grow in every human heart. People wept for the dead Lyrans. But their tears hardened into rage. A question rose everywhere. From soldiers on military bases, from workers in factories, from children in schools. If they can do this to the Lyrans, our allies, who will they do it to next? And in every soul, the same answer burned. Earth would not forgive. Earth would not forget. The massacre of the Lyrans was the spark. And soon, that spark would light a fire that would shake the stars themselves. The hegemony thought the galaxy would remain silent. They believed no one would dare speak against them. That fear would keep every species bowed and obedient. They had underestimated Earth. The Lyran survivors were taken into care. Doctors treated the wounded. Families on Earth opened their homes to the Lyran children, giving them food, shelter, and a desperate, fragile comfort. But nothing could erase the images from their minds. In the capital city, President Eris Thorn called an emergency meeting of the War Council. Admirals and generals filled the underground chamber. Screens flickered with data, Lyran casualties, hegemony fleet movements, and the horrific recordings from the Stardust Drifter. President Thorn spoke first, her voice cold as the void. You have all seen the evidence. You know what has happened. The hegemony has slaughtered the Lyrans, not in a war, but in a premeditated act of terror. They believe we will do nothing. ING. The air trembled with tension. General Marcus Vance, commander of the Terran Marine Corps, slammed his fist on the table. They butchered our allies in cold blood. If we allow this to stand, what message do we send? That humanity bends to fear? That we will not protect our own? Admiral Kalen Vance, Marcus's brother and commander of the First Fleet, leaned forward, his voice like steel. The hegemony sees us as a threat. That is why they did this. This wasn't about the Lyrans. It was a warning to us. Obey, or be erased. If we stay silent, we are next. The room filled with voices rising in anger and defiance. President Thorne raised a hand. Silence fell. Humanity has been tested before, she said, her voice sharp as a blade. We have been invaded, enslaved, and nearly broken. Each time, we rose again. But this is different. The hegemony believes it holds the power of life and death over the entire galaxy. They believe they can erase a species without consequence. She paused, her eyes locking with every member of the council. They are wrong. This is not only about justice for the Lyrans. This is about our own survival. One by one, the generals and admirals stood. They declared their support. They spoke of fleets ready to move, of soldiers ready to fight, of weapons tested and perfected over decades of quiet, paranoid preparation. Humanity had always built with caution, always fearing the day when the hegemony might turn on them. Now, that day had come. The order was given. Earth would march to war. News spread quickly. Shipyards on Luna and Mars lit up as massive, secret warships were awakened from their silent docks. Orbital stations roared to life, preparing fleets that had only ever drilled in simulations. Across the colonies, miners left their shafts and joined the Navy. Farmers left their fields and swore to fight. The Lyran survivors, though broken by grief, asked to join. Talon, the pilot who had saved them, his body now healed, was the first to volunteer. They wanted vengeance. Humanity welcomed them. Together, they would strike back. The hegemony, with spies in every corner of the galaxy, heard the whispers of anger. They saw the fleets moving, and they laughed. They believed Earth was strong, yes, but still young, still primitive. They believed humanity would crumble against the full, overwhelming power of the hegemony armada. They had no idea what awaited them. President Thorne gave one final speech, broadcast to every human world, every ship, every soldier. We fight not only for the Lyrans. We fight for every species that looks to us for hope. We fight for the memory of those who cannot fight anymore. And we fight for our own survival. Her voice rang with righteous fury. The hegemony believes we will break. But they do not know us. They have never known us. We are humanity. We do not forget. We do not forgive. And when we rise as one. The speech ended. Silence followed. And then the galaxy trembled with the sound of 1,000,000 engines igniting at once. The fleets of Earth had been called to arms. The Earth fleet moved through the dark like a storm waiting to break. Thousands of warships, carriers, destroyers, cruisers, frigates, all burning with silent fusion engines, all carrying soldiers who knew they might never return. Their destination, the Lyran home system. When the jump gates opened, Earth's warships burst into the void. What awaited them was not a living system, but a graveyard. The Lyran planets were silent, scarred, and dead. Cities that had once glowed with light and music now lay as blackened, radioactive craters. Oceans boiled with ash. The wreckage of Lyran ships floated across space like frozen bones. No one spoke on the bridges of Earth's ships. The massacre was no longer just an image on a screen. It was real. Then the sensors screamed. From behind the shadow of a shattered moon, the first hegemony warships appeared. 12 destroyers and 2 heavy cruisers. A patrol fleet left to guard the tomb they had created. More ships emerged by the second, filling the black sky with death. Hegemony fleet incoming. A voice reported across the bridge of the UES Indomitable, the flagship of the First Fleet. Admiral Kalen Vance rose from his chair. His face was calm, but his eyes burned with a cold fire. Hold formation. Weapons ready. The hegemony ships spread out, confident in their strength. They had crushed the Lyrans. They believed Earth would be no different. The two sides faced each other in silence. Then the first shot was fired. A hegemony destroyer unleashed a plasma lance, a beam of white fire that ripped across the void. It struck an Earth frigate, tearing through its hull, splitting the vessel in half. The screams of the dying echoed in the comms. Admiral Vance did not flinch. His voice was steady, cold, absolute. Return fire. And Earth's fleet unleashed its fury. Rail cannons roared, sending hypervelocity tungsten slugs screaming through space at a fraction of light speed. Plasma torpedoes lit the black void with trails of burning fire. Laser batteries, focused and relentless, sliced across enemy shields. The hegemony ships staggered, their shields flashing with desperate light. They had expected primitive weapons. They had not expected this. One by one, the destroyers began to break. A rail slug punched straight through the core of a cruiser, splitting it in two. Plasma torpedoes detonated against a dreadnought, burning gaping holes in its armor. Earth's weapons, sharper and deadlier than the hegemony's outdated intelligence reports suggested, tore into them with merciless precision. Still, the hegemony fought back. A volley of plasma fire struck the Earth carrier Atlas, burning through its hangars, turning hundreds of fighters to slag. The carrier's hull groaned, but it did not fall. The surviving fighters streamed out like hornets, swarming the enemy, their pilots a mix of humans and Lyrans, all screaming for vengeance. Talon, the Lyran refugee, was among them. His small fighter, repainted with the sigil of his lost world, danced through the enemy fire. His voice echoed through the comms. For Lyra, for our dead, the battle raged for hours. Space was lit by fire and explosions. The hegemony ships fought with discipline, but they had never faced an enemy that did not fear death. An enemy that fought with the fury of a species avenging its friends. Then came the moment that changed everything. The hegemony flagship, the Iron Hand, the same massive war cruiser that had fired the first shot on Lyra Prime, turned its planet-killer cannons on Admiral Vance's command vessel. "Admiral," his first officer said, his voice tense. "We can't withstand a direct hit from that weapon." Vance stared at the screen, at the enemy ship charging its main weapon. He knew what had to be done. "Bring us closer," he said. The crew hesitated. Closer meant suicide. "Closer," Vance roared. "All power to engines." Ramming speed. The crew obeyed. The Indomitable surged forward, its massive engines screaming. It broke through the hegemony fire, shields collapsing, armor peeling away. On the bridge of the Iron Hand, the hegemony commander watched in disbelief. They're ramming us. Impossible. No civilized species." Vance watched the enemy flagship fill his viewport. He spoke calmly into the fleet-wide comm for Earth. For Lyra, the Indomitable struck the hegemony flagship head-on. The explosion was like a second sun. Fire and light swallowed both ships. For a heartbeat, the battlefield fell silent. And then, humanity roared. With their admiral gone, the crews fought harder, their grief and fury forged into a single, unstoppable weapon. Fueled by Vance's sacrifice, Earth's fleets pushed into the heart of the hegemony formation, smashing their lines, breaking their fleets apart. One by one, the hegemony ships fell. Their dreadnoughts cracked. Their carriers burned. Panic spread through their lines. They broke. They fled. When it was over, the void was filled with wreckage. Hegemony ships floated in pieces. Earth's ships were battered and burned, but they still stood. Humanity had faced the hegemony in open battle and won. On the bridge of the battered carrier Atlas, the senior surviving officer, Admiral Eva Rostova, rose through the smoke. Her face was dark with ash, but her voice carried across the victorious fleet. "Today, the galaxy has learned a lesson. Humanity does not bow. Humanity does not forgive. And we will not stop until every Lyran life is avenged." The first victory was theirs, but the war had just begun. The victory in Lyran space shook the galaxy, but the war was far from over. From the ashes of that battle, Earth's fleets spread outward. Admiral Rostova divided the fleet into strike groups. Carriers swept across the outer rim. Cruisers stalked shipping lanes, tearing apart hegemony LY convoys. Stealth frigates hunted through asteroid fields, striking hidden bases. The galaxy trembled. On colony worlds once loyal to the hegemony, whispers of rebellion grew. The hegemony, enraged and humiliated, gathered their main armies. Vast armadas poured out from their core systems, determined to crush humanity before its defiance could spread further. And the war blazed across the stars. The battles were fierce, fought in orbit, on the ground, and in the endless dark between. Over the frozen moons of Histara, human marines clashed with Kthar's shock troops in brutal, close-quarters combat. On the desert world of Kareth, human tanks dueled hegemony walkers in storms of fire and smoke. Every victory came at a price. Earth's fleets grew thinner. Ships burned. Soldiers fell. But in the ashes of war, something new was born. The Lyrans, once broken and scattered, began to rise again. Survivors joined Earth's fleets in greater numbers, their grief forged into a weapon. The war dragged on. Months of brutal, relentless fighting. The galaxy burned. The hegemony grew desperate. In the deep void near the treacherous star cluster of the Serpent's Nebula, they set a trap. A final, massive trap. They gathered their greatest armada. Hundreds of warships, hidden among the dust clouds and dead moons. The bait was planted. A false transmission, encoded to seem like a lost Lyran signal. Broken voices, begging for help from a mining world deep in the cluster. Admiral Rostova, commander of Earth's Second Fleet, received the signal. Her tactical officer warned her. "Admiral, this has all the hallmarks of a trap." "I know," Rostova said quietly. "But if there is even a 1% chance that Lyrans are alive in there, we go. That is the difference between us and them." The Second Fleet moved into the Serpent's Nebula. The trap closed. Hundreds of hegemony warships emerged from the dust clouds, surrounding them in a cage of fire. Multiple contacts, a voice shouted on the bridge of Rostova's flagship, the UES Sentinel. Hundreds of them. On all sides, the hegemony opened fire. Plasma lances cut across the void. Entire cruisers exploded in seconds. The trap was working. The Second Fleet was collapsing. But Earth had prepared for this. "Unleash the Iron Wave," Rostova ordered calmly. Across the fleet, hidden hatches opened. Hundreds of thousands of autonomous drones, AI-driven weapons platforms, streamed into the void. They swarmed like a storm of angry metal, overwhelming hegemony fighters, tearing into enemy shields, breaking their perfect formations. The hegemony, expecting an easy slaughter, found themselves bleeding. Earth's fleet surged forward. But then, at the center of the battle, the hegemony revealed its ace. A massive siege ship, armed with a graviton cannon, a superweapon that could erase entire fleets in a single strike. It began to charge. Rostova looked at the screen. She knew what had to be done. She thought of Admiral Vance. She thought of the Lyrans. She spoke calmly, as if the words weighed nothing. "Bring us in." Ram the cannon. Her crew froze, but none refused. The Sentinel surged forward, cutting through a storm of fire. Shields collapsing, armor breaking apart. At the final moment, Rostova gave her last command into the fleet-wide comm. "For Earth. For Lyra. End this." The flagship struck the siege ship head-on. The explosion was like a second sun. Fire and light swallowed the hegemony's superweapon. For a heartbeat, the battlefield fell silent. And then, humanity and the Lyrans roared. Fueled by the sacrifice of a second admiral, the fleet pushed into the heart of the hegemony armada, smashing their formations, breaking their fleets apart. One by one, the hegemony ships fell. Their dreadnoughts cracked. Their carriers burned. Panic routed their lines. By the end, only wreckage filled the void. The hegemony's last great armada was gone. Word spread across the galaxy within hours. The hegemony, once feared as unbreakable, had been crushed. Its fleets shattered. Its rule broken. On worlds once chained by fear, people rose in rebellion. Garrisons surrendered. Colonies declared freedom. The galaxy itself had shifted. Earth did not march to conquer. They did not raise their flag over broken worlds. Instead, they raised the memory of the Lyrans, the allies who had been slaughtered, the spark that had started it all. Humanity swore that no species would suffer such betrayal again. In the end, the galaxy learned a new law. Simple, sharp, and unforgettable. Betray Earth's allies, and humanity will burn your empire to ash. The war ended, but its echo carried on. Across the stars, the name of Earth was spoken not with doubt, not with scorn, but with awe and with fear. The hegemony had tried to erase a people. Instead, they had awakened the one force they could never control. Humanity.